The boy I married was much younger than me. At the time of our wedding, I was 40 years old and he was only 20. He was persistent, constantly following me and pleading with me to marry him. At first, I kept refusing, but I too was in need of a companion and support. Eventually, I agreed. Zane used to come to my house for tuitions. He was a very sophisticated, sensible boy and excellent in his studies. Normally, I didn't agree to teach boys, but when I saw Zane's extraordinary ability and intelligence, I couldn't refuse. One of his cousins had been my student for a long time, and it was through her that he approached me. When he showed me his results and explained that he wanted to study for his graduation through home tuition because he didn't find coaching centers effective, I thought it over and said yes. In those days, I was also in need of money. Zane told me he would pay whatever fee I demanded. Usually, I never charged more than 2,000 rupees from any student. But when I saw Zane's expensive clothes, the costly watch on his wrist, and his high-end mobile phone, a bit of greed entered my heart. Or should I call it greed? I was just troubled by my domestic circumstances. So I told him, "Fine, I don't usually teach boys, but if you want to study, you'll have to pay a higher fee so I can schedule you at a separate time. I won't seat you with the other girls. I will give you a separate slot." Hearing this, he smiled and said, "Teacher, I have no objection. Just tell me the fee." I looked at him from head to toe, and suddenly the words 8,000 rupees came out of my mouth. I thought he would try to bargain after hearing such a high amount, but he smiled and replied, "Teacher, I will pay you 10,000 rupees, but you must give me extra time so I can study properly." I was stunned. In the neighborhood where I lived, people would panic hearing a fee of even 1,000 rupees, and here he was, happily ready to give me 10,000. I nodded and told him to come the next day at 7 p.m. "I'll teach you from 7 to 9 when no other children are here." He smiled, agreed, pulled out his wallet, and without hesitation handed me 10,000 rupees as an advance. I had never seen so much money as a single student's fee. As he left, saying Allah Hafiz, I peeked out the window. Seeing his heavy motorbike, I realized he belonged to a very wealthy family. He rode off like the wind while I looked back at the other girls, busy with their studies. Their combined fees barely amounted to 12,000 or 15,000 rupees. Some paid 1,500, others 1,000, and even then I never received their payments on time. I'd have to ask 1,000 times before they handed it over, making me feel embarrassed of myself. But this boy had paid in advance without even being asked. I felt happy thinking that if he completed his 2-year graduation with me, I wouldn't have any financial worries. After the girls left, I got busy with housework. I had been living alone in this house for years. My only sense of life came from these tuition children. My father had passed away many years ago. After his death, I started working at a company. However, after 2 years, something happened that forced me to quit. Those first 2 years were peaceful, but after what happened at the office, I quietly resigned and stayed home. But staying home doesn't put food on the table. Driven by necessity, I used my education to teach at a school in the morning and give tuitions in the evening. That's how I managed. Then even harder times hit. My mother passed away. After her death, I left the school as well. I didn't even feel like stepping out of the house anymore. Moments from the past would blur before my eyes. I remembered the day I had to leave the office every single day. I started running the house solely through tuitions. I was completely alone. Only a few people in the neighborhood were sympathetic. The rest looked down on me for living alone. Many said, "A lone woman ruins society. Why don't you get married?" But I had lost all trust in men. Besides, I was turning 40. Who would marry me anyway? I began spending my life in a routine, keeping busy with chores, teaching, and then tossing and turning alone at night. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I would get up at dawn and sit on the prayer mat before Allah. It had been 5 years since my mother's death. I was 40 now, and I didn't think that fresh breeze of happiness every girl dreams of would ever come to me. In my youth, I too had dreamt of marriage and love, but now I considered myself old. After everything I had been through, I was terrified of the word marriage. And then Zane entered my life. I began to think that with Zane's fees, I could finally finish the house repairs that had been pending for years. The roof leaked during rains. The kitchen plaster was crumbling, the mattress was ruined, and the paint was peeling off. These were expenses I couldn't afford. I thought that if I taught Zane for a few months, I could make the house beautiful again, and maybe I'd start feeling at home within these 4 walls. The next day, I finished the girls' classes by 6 p.m. and cleaned the house. Around 7 p.m., Zane arrived. I called him inside and sat him where the girls usually studied. I wanted to teach him with all my heart, but Zane was in the habit of asking many questions. Every few minutes he'd ask something unrelated to studies. "Teacher, how do you live alone? Aren't you scared? How do you manage expenses? Why didn't you marry?" I scolded him several times to focus on his studies, but he would start again after a while. By the second day, I realized this was just his nature. However, I noticed that he remembered everything I taught him perfectly. Gradually, we started talking more. I asked about his family. He briefly mentioned he was an only child. I soon realized he was far wealthier than I had imagined. He would bring expensive chocolates, gifts, or ice cream. I'd refuse, but he'd say, "It's my pleasure. I like you very much." I assumed he meant it as a student admiring a teacher, but as days passed, the way he looked at me changed. He would sit for hours after his lessons, helping me with chores, bringing groceries, and becoming a pillar of support. However, rumors started in the neighborhood. People began asking, "Teaching girls is fine, but why does she call a young man to her house in the dark of the night?" How could I tell them I needed his fees? Only I knew my struggles. To avoid scandal, I told Zane, "Find another tutor. It's impossible for me to teach you anymore." He was shocked. "Teacher, are you angry with me? Did I say something wrong?" He started apologizing. Despite his wealth, he had no ego. He was very humble. When I told him about the neighbor's gossip, his expression changed. After a silence, he asked, "Are you really asking me to leave because of them? Are they that important to you? Do they take care of you?" I went quiet. He was right. When had the neighbors ever shared my burden? When had they fixed my leaking roof or knocked on my door after my mother's funeral? Yet their words stung like thorns. I whispered, "Zine, the problem isn't what they say. The problem is that I am a lone woman. When a woman is alone, every tongue feels entitled to speak." He immediately replied, "But you aren't weak, teacher. You've handled everything alone." There was a sincerity in his voice that I had been searching for years, but was afraid to acknowledge. I tried to change the subject, but he insisted. "If the neighbors are the problem, I'll come during the day. I'll even pay double the fee. Just keep teaching me." I was startled. "No, Zane, it's not about the money. It's about the people." He smiled slightly. "It's my right to study from the teacher I like. I'm comfortable with you." In that moment, I saw his age, 20 years old, full of stubbornness, truth, and a strange fearlessness. And inside me was a 40-year-old woman who weighed every step. I told him firmly, "Zane, don't come from tomorrow. I won't take this infamy upon myself. You are a young man and people are pointing fingers at my character." With tearful eyes, he stood up. At the door, he stopped. "Teacher, if you think removing me will stop the gossip, you're wrong. People will say what they want. Your decision might ruin my future too." He left, and I couldn't sleep that night. His words, the neighbors' taunts, and my loneliness all blurred together. He was right. Even when I didn't teach him, they judged me. If I stopped now, his academic year would be ruined. The next day, I sat in a corner after the girls left. I didn't expect him to come, but at 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. He was standing there with a smile. "I knew you'd be waiting." He walked in, handed me a chocolate and a rose. I took the rose, my heart racing with an unknown anxiety. I tried to be serious. "Zane, I told you not to come." "You did," he said, pulling up a chair, "but I knew your heart wouldn't agree. Besides, I came to study, not to run away." That day, the atmosphere was different. Silence spoke volumes. We studied for 2 hours. At 9 p.m., I said that was enough. He stood up and asked, "Teacher, can I ask one thing? If I were your age?" The question shook me. After a silence, I whispered, "Zane, it's not about age, it's about circumstances." He looked at me and said, "I know how to change circumstances, teacher." From then on, he became regular but different. No personal questions, just respect and studies. The gossip died down because he started coming during the day, sometimes with his cousin. A year passed and Zane topped his graduation. He brought me a suit and sweets, saying, "This is all because of you." I felt a genuine joy I hadn't felt in years. He had become a habit, handling my bills, my medicines, my chores. When I'd protest, he'd say, "You aren't alone." Then one day he suddenly said, "I want to marry you." I almost dropped my teacup. "What are you saying? You are my student and half my age." He was calm. "You were my teacher, but not anymore. Age is just to scare people. I want your companionship. The world can go to hell." I flatly refused. He left and didn't call or come for days. My heart felt empty. I kept telling myself it was impossible. Society would never accept it. Then I ran into his cousin at the market. She told me Zane was in the hospital. He had tried to take his own life. My soul trembled. I rushed to the hospital, fearing I was the cause. He was lying pale and weak with an IV drip. I sat by his bed and wept, blaming myself for being so harsh. "Zane, open your eyes," I whispered. Eventually, the doctor told me he was out of danger but under immense mental pressure. I held his hand, finally admitting to myself that this boy had made a place in my life. When he woke up and saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "You came," he whispered. "Are you crazy?" I scolded through tears. Do you realize how scared I was? He smiled weakly. I just wanted to know if it would matter to you if I wasn't here. It would matter, Zane. It would matter a lot, I said clearly. He then repeated his proposal. I want to marry you. I panicked again. What about your parents? He laughed softly. My mother has passed away and my father lives in America. I don't need anyone's permission. I just need your answer. I gave in. The battle between my heart and mind ended. We got married the next day. That night he came to my house. He sat beside me and asked, Do you know why I married you? I smiled. Because you love me. He looked down. Yes, I do. But before that, there was another reason. What he said next made my skin crawl. He explained, I was in that office years ago when you were fired. You were my father's employee. I had come to see him with my mother. I saw you crying, accusing him of harassment. Because you were poor, no one believed you. My father fired you and slandered your character. That night, my parents had a massive fight. My mother knew his true character and yelled at him for hurting innocent girls. He slapped her. That slap is burned into my memory. He continued, My mother cried all night, revealing his affairs with other women. That same night, she died of a heart attack. My father left for America to continue his lifestyle, leaving me here. When I saw your picture with my cousin, I recognized you. I came here to make amends for my father's sin. I wanted to fix the life he ruined, but gradually I fell in love with you. I broke down in tears. Years ago, my engagement had broken because of those false allegations. Zane's father had ruined my life, but I didn't want to punish Zane for it. Zane hugged me and promised he would never be like his father. He moved into my house and started a job, leaving his father's wealth behind. When his father found out his only son was living with a woman like me, he came back in a rage, but when he saw me, his expression changed. Faced with the truth, he stood ashamed before his son. Zane told him he didn't want wealth that had cost his mother her life. Today we live a simple life. The neighbors still gossip. They call me a sorceress or a cradle snatcher. But the truth of my life, only I know that.